Good evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, February 25th. Donald Trump says he'll impose sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods next week. The U.S. president's plan of 25% tariffs on most imports from Canada with a 10% levy on energy was delayed until March 4th.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, you know, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything, every aspect that you could imagine they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night, and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this? So the tariffs will go forward, yes, and we're going to make up a lot of territory. All we want is reciprocal. We want reciprocity. We want to have the same. So if somebody charges us, we charge them. It's very simple, but it'll be very good for our country. Our country will be extremely liquid and rich again.
Mr. Trump granted a month-long pause, saying he'd work on an economic deal with Canada in the meantime. But what's confusing is that Trump criticized trade deals, even though his first term signed the USMCA, the deal that governs trade between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly was in London on Monday, participating in bilateral meetings, both to reinforce Canada-UK relations and to discuss issues related to the U.S. and the Ukraine. When asked about U.S. President Trump's plan to proceed with threatened tariffs taking effect in both March and April, Ms. Joly reiterated that Canadians need to stand strong and send a clear message that we will fight back.
I think that we have to be ready for all scenarios. And what Canadians can trust is that I will always be there to tell them the truth, and not only that, to make sure that ultimately we're ready and that we come up with a strong reaction. You know, Mackenzie, what is important to remember is Canada is the only country on earth that actually decided to come up with such a strong response of $155 billion worth of tariffs against the U.S., and we were the only ones saying exactly what we would do with that first tranche of tariffs of $30 billion. And why am I saying that is since we're not the only ones under the threat of tariffs, this is exactly why I'm here right now in the UK, and I've been in Europe now for 10 days. It is important that allies under that threat work together and work as a coalition. By having the same types of countermeasures, of counter tariffs. And so that's what I've done in Paris, in London, in also Munich, in Germany, and also in Brussels. And I'll continue to do that.
And on the issue of Trump's tariff threat, the Conservatives again criticized the government for their decision to prorogue Parliament in the face of this threat.
Canada was given a 30-day reprieve from these tariffs. And where have the Carney-Trudeau Liberals been for the last month? Well, they haven't been in the House of Commons, where they could have passed a bring-it-home tax cut, where they could have repealed their anti-pipeline bill, C-69. They haven't been here where they could have canceled their job-killing, food bank line driving carbon tax. Instead, they've been focused on internal party matters, while this pressing issue is in front of Canadians. And so the question to the Carney-Trudeau Liberals tonight is, what are they going to do in the next week after having squandered the last 3 weeks where they should have been preparing to deal with President Trump's unjust tariffs?
President Donald Trump says he's hopeful that Russia's war in Ukraine is nearing an endgame as he met with French President Emmanuel Macron on the third anniversary of the Russian invasion. In a press briefing on Monday, President Macron said that the U.S. and France have always stood on the right side of history.
I want to thank Mr. President for his hospitality. We had a good discussion this morning for the G7 here, and for the third year of this war in Ukraine, and I think our common objective clearly is to build peace, and a solid and long-standing peace. And this is what we will discuss, obviously, because I have great respect for the bravery and the resistance of Ukrainian people, and we do share the objective of peace, but we are very aware of the necessity to have guarantees and solid peace in order to stabilize the situation. I'm here as a friend because through centuries we've been friends, and we are personal friends, as you mentioned it, because we work very well together. And I think the US and France always stand on the same side, the right side, I would say, of history.
Mr. Trump says that he believes Vladimir Putin would accept European peacekeepers in Ukraine and that Ukraine's president will soon come to the U.S. to sign a deal to give the U.S. access to Ukraine's critical minerals.
It looks like we're getting very close. The deal's being worked on. We're, I think, getting very close to getting an agreement where we get our money back over a period of time. But it also gives us something where I think it's very beneficial to their economy, to them as a country. But, you know, we're in for $350 billion. How we got there, I don't know. But that's a lot of money, a lot of money invested. And we had nothing to show for it. And it was the Biden administration's fault. The Europeans are in for about $100 billion, and they do it as in the form of a loan. And the Europeans have been great on this issue. They understood it wasn't fair, and we were able to work something out. But with the Ukrainians, I think I can say that we're very close. Scott's around here someplace, and I think we can say that we're very, hi Scott, I think we're very close. Do you have something to say about that, Scott?
We are very close.
Good.
1 yard line.
All right, good.
But on the prospect of compensating the U.S., France's president implied that Ukraine should be compensated first and by Russia because they are the aggressor in the war.
I support the idea to have Ukraine first being compensated because they are the ones to lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day and Russia would have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
The U.S. president also warned that the war could turn into World War III if it is not stopped, saying it is in the best interest of Ukraine and Russia to stop the killing now.
Now, we're helping Ukraine like nobody's ever helped Ukraine before. And I can say this, if I didn't become president, Ukraine would right now still be at a level where there would be no even thinking about a peace. And it's a sad thing that this happened. This would have never happened, this war, if I were president. Zero chance. And it has happened. So my function is to get you out of the war, get them out of the war, let them live. It's a bloody war. It's a horrible war. Thousands of people are being killed a week. And I would say Russia, maybe 700,000 people. I think Ukraine, probably a similar number. And that's not talking about the towns and the cities that have been blown up. That's talking about soldiers. This has been a horrible, bloody mess. And we're going to get it solved. We got to get it solved. And you know, we're not talking about America's soldiers from this country. We're talking about Russia and Ukraine. But on a humanitarian basis, we have to get this very, very bloody, savage problem solved. And I will say this also, it could lead to World War III if it's not solved. You know, there'll be a point at which it's not going to stop at those two countries. Already there's such involvement from other countries. And it could really lead to a very big war, World War III, and we're not going to let that happen either.
After the break, the United States has split with the European allies by refusing to blame Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. After that, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced his government will increase defense spending. And thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square to pray for Pope Francis. We'll have these stories and more news right after the break. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be back shortly. In a dramatic shift in transatlantic relations under President Donald Trump, the United States has split with its European allies by refusing to blame Russia for its invasion of Ukraine in votes of 3 UN resolutions seeking an end to the war. In the UN General Assembly, the U.S. joined Russia in voting against a Europe-backed Ukrainian resolution that calls out Moscow's aggression and demands an immediate withdrawal of Russian troops. The U.S. then chose not to vote on its own resolution after European countries led by France changed it to clearly say that Russia was the aggressor. Andrew Donaldson from OrdinaryTimes.com joined us for more on the votes.
So with the United Nations, we have to remember these General Assembly resolutions, especially when they're back and forth and conflicting resolutions with this, are not really worth all that much. They do resolutions condemning everything all the time. What is important here is the symbolism and the total shift in policy of the Donald Trump administration, this one, against what has gone on from previous administration, including his own. Usually, U.S. foreign policy changes a lot because of our system of government. Of course, we change Congress every 2 years, the Senate, a third of it every 2 years, and then the presidency every 4 to 8 years. So we have a lot of turnover, and foreign policy is not something the U.S. is very consistent on. But there's usually at least some thread in it, and you don't have a complete 360 on a very important international topic like Vladimir Putin and his control of Russia and his force of power and things like Ukraine. And of course, you can go back in time because Ukraine's not the first offense that he has of invading countries. He'd done it in Georgia and other places and in the Crimea, which led directly to this current war in the Ukraine. So this policy with Trump, this is very shocking to a lot of people, but in the context of the last few weeks, we should have seen it coming. You had J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference and the comments that he made. You have Secretary Hegseth and the comments that he's made, and you have Secretary of State Rubio, who has changed a lot of what he said throughout his career to match the Trumpian policies that now he has to parrot. And this is all kind of in a frame of Trump's own words. He really, really likes Vladimir Putin, and he really, really doesn't like Zelensky for a lot of reasons. You can go back to the impeachment stuff where he blames Zelensky and the what he calls a perfect phone call as the genesis for the first ill-gotten impeachment attempt against Donald Trump. He just doesn't like Zelensky, and a lot of this may just be personal, and it's applying it to a policy that has millions of lives and the fate of Eastern Europe and greater Eurasia at stake. And it's a shocking development that really shouldn't shock us at all. Donald Trump has always seen the world viewed through a lens of Donald Trump first, making a deal second, and everything else third. And now we're seeing it play out in the UN. We're seeing it play out in negotiations. And the benefactor of all this is Vladimir Putin, whose long-term strategic goal is if he gets 10, 20, 30% of what he wanted out of this war, he's probably going to win in his own mind. And if he gets the land bridge to Crimea, which looks like he's probably going to get, and all this without any concessions at all, which the Trump administration isn't demanding anything out of Putin. He's just demanding it out of Zelensky. Putin's going to be the big winner out of here. And that would be a very, very strong turn of events from the last 20, 30 years of U.S. foreign policy.
And in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that his government will significantly increase defense spending with a pledge to hit 2.6% of GDP by 2027.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion more on defence every year from 2027. But, Mr. Speaker, we also face enemies that are sophisticated in cyber attacks, sabotage, even assassination. And so our intelligence and security services are an increasingly vital part of protecting both us and our allies. So on top of the funding of 2.5% that I've just announced, going forward we will recognise the incredible contribution of our intelligence and security services to the defence of the nation, which means taken together we will be spending 2.6% on our defence from 2027.
This Sunday, the streets of Beirut were packed for the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah, the now dead former leader of the Hezbollah terrorist group. The funeral featured a brief show of force by the Israeli Air Force, who did a low and slow flyby. But Canadian lawmakers are raising concerns about some Canadians who were in attendance at Nasrallah's funeral. And the Toronto Sun's Brian Passafoom has more on the controversy.
Well, the big one was Charlotte Cates. She's a leader of the Semidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, which last year was declared a terrorist organization by Canada. I believe the U.S. also considers Semidoun terrorists, as does Germany and Israel. One of the things that really a lot of people are questioning since this, since the imposition of its, this terror designation by the Canadian government is what exactly does that entail? Because she was at the funeral in Beirut on Sunday. She was there. She tweeted from the scene. She tweeted a photo of herself holding up a big Samidoun flag. And yeah, a lot of questions is like, what's the point of declaring a group a terrorist organization if their leader is allowed to, travel willy-nilly around the world? There's a lot of questions about how she made her way there. There was a story in the Jerusalem Post published yesterday on Monday that it said a lot of anti-Israel influencers were flown there as part of sort of a junket funded by Tehran. But I reached out to Samidoun, but of course they never reply to media contacts. Neither does Hamas or Hezbollah either. Terror groups don't really like to talk to the media. But it's not clear if she was a part of that. But at the same time, it's it's raising a lot of questions as to why she's able to do this, and there's other questions too about her citizenship. She was born in the U.S. She was educated in the U.S. About 14 or 15 years ago, she married a Palestinian Canadian. Her and her husband currently make their home in BC, but yeah, there's never really been a real answer. Is she a citizen? Is she just a permanent resident? That has all sorts of implications on if or when or how Canada lets her back into the country. So a lot of these questions are really up in the air right now. Yeah, Dimitri Lasaris, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I apologize. He was there as well. He's another well-known figure in the Canadian anti-Israel scene. He was actually recorded and posted video of the Israeli jet flyover during the funeral. That was a sort of Israel flying the flag, a bit of a message to Hezbollah and their supporters that we killed them, and you can't hide from us. We're there, we're present, and we're keeping an eye on you. Which particularly the tens of thousands of people in the stadium for the funeral responded in the way that you'd expect. They criticized Jews and they criticized Israel, which is what these people normally do. So yeah, there's a lot of questions about Canadians that went to go visit this funeral.
We also discussed what the response has been from lawmakers in response to the controversy.
There's been a lot of negative reaction. I spoke to Kevin Wong. He's the MP for Spadina Fort York in Toronto. He's probably the most vocal pro-Israel, anti-terror, anti-Hamas and Hezbollah voice within Parliament right now. And he said that the fact that she's able to do this is flaunting Canada's anti-terror laws. Kind of what's the point of declaring it? As well, a story I'm working on today, Senator Leo Dusakos has also issued a letter of his own. He issued a letter to Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, demanding answers. What is her citizenship status? Why is she allowed to seemingly represent Canada with impunity at these things. And, whatever became of the charges that were supposed to be laid. She was arrested last May at a anti-Israel protest in Vancouver. Vancouver police recommended charges, but the BC Prosecution Service never followed through with that. So there's a lot of questions as to why we even have these laws to begin with if the prosecutors decline to go through the charges.
Thousands of people have gathered in St. Peter's Square to pray for Pope Francis, expressing sorrow for his suffering, hope for his recovery, and gratitude for his efforts to steer the Catholic Church in new directions. The 88-year-old Francis has pneumonia in both lungs and remains in critical condition despite a slight improvement after 11 days in hospital. After the break, Liberal leadership contenders will take the stage again tonight for the English language debate in Montreal. And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he's still the right person to lead as the New Democrats see a recent drop in support. And on Monday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced the next phase of the province's steps to combat opioid addiction. Stay with us. These stories and more right after the break. Liberal leadership contenders will take the stage again tonight for the English language debate in Montreal before voting begins tomorrow for the March 9th contest. The four candidates played it safe in last night's French language debate and had their own ideas about when they might launch an election. Karina Gold said it would depend on if Canada is in a tariff war with the U.S., while Frank Bayless said it's important to have a stable government in place. Mark Carney also said there would have to be a government with a strong, clear mandate. And Chrystia Freeland said she would base her decision on what's best for the national interest. In a post-debate scrum, Ms. Freeland said that all four contenders agreed that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is not the guy to stand up to Donald Trump. As the New Democrats see a recent drop in support, party leader Jagmeet Singh says he's still the right person to lead. A recent Leger poll suggests that NDP support stands at just 14% and would drop to 12% with Mark Carney as Liberal leader. As of February 14th, the NDP has nominated 140 candidates in 343 ridings for the upcoming federal election, which could begin as early as mid-March. Mr. Singh says that he will fight like hell to defend public health care, noting both the Liberals and Conservatives are proposing cuts to federal spending, which could include health and dental care programs. And yesterday, he released a campaign-style ad on exactly that message.
I wasn't raised to be a politician. Never dreamed of becoming one. I worked for minimum wage to take care of my family when my dad was sick, and made it out of law school to see the system only works for those at the top. So I got in the ring to take on the powerful few and fight for you. It's time for someone in your corner, especially when times are tough. I won't back down. I won't stop fighting for you. I'm ready.
On Monday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced the next phase of the province's steps to combat opioid addiction, known as the Alberta Recovery Model. Ms. Smith began the press conference with sharing details on the recent progress that Alberta has made in the fight against addiction.
Our government has recognized this, and we're a leader in this battle. I'm pleased to announce that we're taking another step forward in meeting the challenge of making recovery possible. We are continuing our work to develop compassionate intervention legislation, and we hope to be able to introduce it very soon. This would be a tool to help individuals who've lost the capacity to help themselves and are a danger to themselves or others. And if passed, Budget 2025 will provide $180 million over 3 years towards building 2 new compassionate intervention centres, one in Edmonton and one in Calgary, to lay the groundwork for the implementation of the Compassionate Intervention Act. These facilities, known as the Northern Alberta and Southern Alberta Compassionate Intervention Centres, would have 150 secure beds each and provide proper health care for patients with complex addiction or mental health needs, much more comprehensive than a traditional addiction treatment centre. Our Minister of Finance and President of Treasury Board, Nate Horner, will be tabling his budget this Thursday afternoon. And if it passes, construction on these facilities would begin in 2026 and be operational by 2029. We're creating advisory committees to guide and support the implementation of compassionate intervention. I've also directed the minister to identify up to 50 beds in southern Alberta and up to 50 beds in northern Alberta within existing facilities so that we can implement the policy while facility construction is underway.
While detailing her government's plan for building new addiction treatment facilities, Ms. Smith spoke on U.S. President Trump's threatened tariffs if Canada doesn't take steps to bring opioid crises under control, saying that bringing people out of addiction would both reduce demand and help to ease these economic tensions, calling it, quote, the compassionate step to take.
There is no compassion in leaving people to suffer in the throes of addiction. We will not sacrifice our communities or give up on those suffering from addiction. Aside from the heart-rending toll on families, our failed past policies now have us facing an economic threat from our largest trading partner. If Canada does not willingly take steps to get this crisis under control and stop the flow of deadly drugs such as fentanyl, the U.S. will impose tariffs to force us into responsible actions. Bringing people out of addiction would reduce demand and help ease these tensions, and it's the compassionate step to take. Every Albertan deserves a full and productive life, which is impossible when addiction has taken over.
Alberta's Minister of Finance will be tabling his budget this Thursday, and if it is passed, construction would begin in 2026, and those new addiction centres would be operational by 2029. Ontario's main political party leaders are making their last pitches to voters ahead of Thursday's provincial election. Doug Ford has stressed the importance of having a strong 4-year mandate to outlive and outlast President Trump. However, in a news conference in Ottawa this morning, he was pressed on how he expects to have a strong mandate when less than 40% of people in Ontario are voting.
Well, absolutely. We have a democratic process here, and the people should go out there and vote. I encourage every single person to go out to the polls and vote. So let's see what happens on Thursday, and the people decide. This is a democracy. But we do need a strong mandate from the people of Ontario to outlive and outlast the Trump administration. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the people of Ontario, protect the communities, protect businesses, and protect jobs.
Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie was in Toronto this morning and during a press conference was asked why she chose to endorse Liberal leadership contender Mark Carney 2 days before the Ontario election.
So Mark Carney is a very decisive leader, an experienced leader, and this is a moment in time, and he is the right person for this moment in time. He's a leader that can stand up to Donald Trump and speak with some authority and experience on tariffs, but he's also a leader who will get the basics right, and that's my focus here in Ontario today, to get the basics right for people. People don't want fantasy tunnels. They don't want to give more money to a foreign-owned spa company than it's being invested in their healthcare system today. They don't want giveaways and gimmicks. They want the basics right. They want to know that they have a family doctor. They want the wait times in their hospitals reduced. They want their taxes cut. And they want us to show that, make their life more affordable once again.
Crombie was also asked if there was a reason Mark Carney hasn't endorsed her campaign and if that was going to happen soon.
I think, Jessica, if you look at his or Twitter feed or whatever it's called today, you will see that the support is reciprocal.
Is there there was two parts to that question.
So Jessica, we're both very busy with our own campaigns, and there's a lot of interaction between the teams, and as you well know, he supported me in leadership as well, and as I said, this is the moment in time, and I think he is the right leader for this moment.
Second,
he tweeted, thank you, good luck, complimented you, but he didn't explicitly endorse you. Do you interpret it as a straight-up endorsement?
I certainly do. Thank you.
Loblaw is planning to open 80 new grocery and pharmacy stores this year, with 50 expected to be discount grocers. The company says the new locations are part of an approximately $10 billion investment over the next 5 years, including $2.2 billion this year. More than 300 grocery and pharmacy locations are expected to be renovated over the next year. Dr. Sylvain Charlebois joined us for more on the announcement.
People may not know this, but every year in February, Loblaws actually makes an announcement similar to this. It announces that it's reinvesting in its operations. It's opening up a bunch of stores. This year's number is 80. They never actually talk about the number of stores they actually close, which is always interesting. But overall, I think it's just a normal strategic realignment put forward by the company, essentially, and there's nothing really new about what's happening. It is quite normal for a company to reinvest and realign its strategy. The one thing that caught my attention, of course, is that you can see that the heavy discounting that's been going on for the last couple of years is over. You're seeing the number one grocer focusing more on value, on selling value and major brands. So you can tell that Loblaw is paying attention to its no frills sales. They're starting to soften a little bit, and we're seeing the same numbers since, I would say, November. People aren't really bargain hunting as much. Some are still bargain hunting, but there's less bargain hunting out there right now.
We also discussed the push for more Canadian-made content and whether or not this will help Canadian consumers or just impact Loblaw's bottom line.
Well, Loblaw is Loblaw. So Loblaw will carry a product they know it can sell, essentially. But keep in mind, Loblaw is in the middle of what I would consider Canada's most formidable food supercluster, and that's President's Choice and No Name. And most of these products are already Canadian. They're manufactured in Canada. And so people don't know this, but a Loblaw-owned stores is pretty Canadian and already. And so I think the announcement is just to reinforce that message to Canadians, essentially. But I think the key here is realignment, opening up different stores, and of course, focusing on value more than bargain.
Coming up after the break, a new report says the high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City could deliver billions of dollars in economic benefits. And a Republican who left the Department of Government Efficiency Initiative on President Trump's first day has launched his bid for Ohio governor. And some Canadian Tesla drivers are looking to cut ties with the brand, citing Elon Musk's political affiliations and recent controversies. These stories and more news right after the break. A Republican who left the Department of Government Efficiency Initiative on President Donald Trump's first day has launched his bid for Ohio governor. Millionaire biotech entrepreneur and former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy kicked off his campaign in his native Cincinnati on Monday.
I am honored to announce my candidacy to serve as the next governor of the state of Ohio. President Trump is reviving our conviction in America. We require a leader here at home who will revive our conviction in Ohio. And that is why today I am honored to announce that I am running to be the next governor of a great state at the heart of the greatest nation known to mankind, the state where I was born and raised, the state where Apurva and I raise our two sons today, a state whose best days are still ahead. I am honored to announce my candidacy to serve as the next governor of the state of Ohio.
The 39-year-old joins the 2026 primary field a month after presumed frontrunner and then Lieutenant Governor John Husted was appointed to Vice President J.D. Vance's former U.S. Senate seat. President Donald Trump posted his endorsement of Mr. Ramaswamy on social media Monday night. Some Canadian Tesla drivers are looking to cut ties with the brand, citing Elon Musk's political affiliations and recent controversies. Club Tesla Quebec conducted a survey and found that 80% want to disassociate from Mr. Musk. 50% of those surveyed said that they wouldn't be attending any public Tesla events, while many owners have even reported experiencing hostility on the road while driving their EV. We talked to Gad Elmaznino from Club Tesla Quebec about whether this is the start of a larger trend and how Tesla owners can navigate the backlash.
Tesla as a company is much more than Elon Musk. People associate Elon with the company, obviously, and he does have a lot to do with it. But it's grown to be something that's much more than Tesla. It's a brand that's recognized for its high quality electric vehicles, long range, superchargers, technology. So I think the company itself, which is composed of many people, lots of engineers, lots of brilliant people, other than Musk, they already have a little bit of a separation from Musk in terms of how they operate as a company. Now, Musk has done all sorts of things over the years that had to do with maybe not being the typical CEO, and the company has generally been able to weather the storms when they've happened, so to speak. So I don't know that they'll be doing anything different. I mean, the shareholders ultimately decide, who the executives are, and if they believe that something needs to be done at some point, the shareholders will speak. But the company and the product continues to be a solid product, and I think that they're going to just keep pushing that forward, that we're a company, we're up there, we're a leader, and we continue to build excellent products. So from what I've seen, there hasn't been a major slowdown in Tesla's adoption due to the controversies surrounding Musk. So people shopping for EVs, they're often making decisions based on practical factors, so range and charging infrastructure, price, technology, and Tesla still leads in those areas, which keeps, I think, demand strong. However, for some buyers, obviously, Musk's persona does factor a little bit into their decision. And I have heard of some cases where people have chosen either another brand or to hold off a purchase because they don't want to be associated with him. But overall, I think in Canada, in general, the shift to EVs is driven more by incentives and infrastructure improvements and environmental concerns rather than the actions of any one individual.
We also talked about how Tesla's reputation might be affected and whether the negative public perception of Musk could impact the adoption of EVs in Canada with Tim Burrows from the Electric Vehicle Society.
I do think that it's had a major impact on the Tesla community. It has served, I think, to some degree to polarize it. There are folks who are defending the position that Elon has taken with the Trump administration, and there are those who certainly oppose it and are upset about it. So yeah, it's had a major effect, but it's mostly I think been in polarizing it. I think there will be some shift away from it, some potential loss in business, but this is a double-edged sword. So that there are folks who probably wouldn't have considered electric vehicle, for example, prior to this. And now, because EVs have become politicized in a sense, it's probably gaining an audience on one side of the equation, but losing it on the other. I think that the news from Trump and from Elon Musk will indeed slow down EV adoption in Canada, but I don't think it will be a permanent slowdown. I think that while adoption will slow, it won't be stopped. And I think the shift to electrification will continue. After all, whenever you have a superior technology that performs better, ultimately costs less, and then happens to be better for the environment, you're not going to stop it. It will take over.
A new report says the high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City could deliver billions of dollars in economic benefits. The C.D. Howe Institute study found that the Promised Line would generate between $15 and $27 billion in value for Canadians over 6 decades. It says the biggest chunk of that sum, up to a third, comes from user benefits, namely time savings and greater reliability than Via Rail's spotty train service. Along with the economic benefits to those living in the Toronto-Quebec City corridor, the line would also reduce greenhouse gas emissions and road congestion. David Jones, senior fellow at the C.D. Howe Institute, joined us for more on the report.
We undertook an economic benefit study for a new rail link between Toronto and Quebec City, and to estimate those benefits. They're not necessarily sort of cash savings, but we think of them as kind of broader economic benefits. We applied essentially sort of international kind of best standards on transport appraisal guidance for how methodologies for how you would get to those benefits. And they, broadly speaking, they're in 5 areas. So the first is user benefits in terms of time savings, and you can effectively attach a sort of monetary value to time saved from faster travel. That includes not only, for example, if the high-speed line is eventually built, that is quicker, but also that includes a reduction in delays that are felt by current Via Rail passengers having to share the line with freight. Secondly, there are agglomeration benefits, which are effectively by reducing the time spent traveling between 2 zones, even if 2 people are still located in the same place, they are effectively closer. It's a concept called effective density. So that means that labor markets are effectively more dense. Companies or entrepreneurs can meet and discuss more regularly. Then we found there were some emission savings. So transport tends to be relatively low emission compared to potentially displaced source of travel, so air and road. There is reduced congestion on the road networks. Again, there's a value of time attached to that. And finally, less traffic on the roads was forecast to reduce traffic incidents, so improved safety. So that's how we came up with those 5 areas.
We also asked for his response to the critics who argue that Canada doesn't have the capacity to build those big projects without going significantly over budget.
I'm aware of that claim. And I would say, so firstly, I would say that's not unique to Canada. So, as I mentioned, I'm from the UK. We have plenty of examples of projects in the rail sector and otherwise that have gone over budget. I think sometimes there are, so for example, the environmental and kind of planning considerations that are very important and have significant benefits as well. So kind of doing the proper consultation, environmental assessments. If you don't have those things, then you can do a project more cheaply. If you do have those things, then you are generating, societal welfare, but things might take a little bit longer. So there's that kind of trade-off. And then, yeah, I mean, in terms of the sort of where there are different ways in which projects can be structured, so the kind of P3 model, or sometimes you can have sort of direct tendering and the role of government and potentially sort of conflicts between different providers or kind of construction companies. So I wouldn't say that those problems are insurmountable. Those are challenges that major projects face almost internationally, and those are the areas that effectively require really good project management and kind of clear contractual relationships between the government and developers.
I'm Teresa Skupik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Good night, Canada.